Saddam Hussein remains one of the most controversial figures of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. His name evokes strong reactions, often polarizing opinions across the globe. Was he simply a brutal tyrant, responsible for immense suffering and death? Or was he a complex leader, not serving for the Western interest, who genuinely sought to build a strong, modern Iraq? The narrative surrounding him is often dominated by headlines focusing on genocide, war crimes, and conflict. How was Iraq's economy under Saddam? It had become the third largest economy in the Middle East by 1980. This occurred in part because of the industrialization and infrastructure development initiatives led by Saddam Hussein in the 1970s, which included irrigation projects, railway and highway construction, and rural electrification. But what about the periods of apparent progress, the national pride he fostered, or the significant development initiatives under his rule? Exploring Saddam Hussein's legacy requires looking beyond the simplified labels. It means questioning how external factors, including Western inputs and beneficial opinions, shape the international perception of his regime. Our goal is to delve deeper, to explore the multifaceted reality of his time in power and uncover a more complete picture. We aim to understand the real story of Saddam Hussein, acknowledging the contradictions and complexities that defined his rule and its impact on Iraq and the wider region. Saddam Hussein was born in 1937 into a poor family near the town of Tyrant in northern Iraq. His early life was marked by hardship and instability, experiences that would profoundly shape his worldview and political ambitions. He became involved in politics at a young age, joining the Ba'ath Party. This secular, pan-Arab nationalist movement sought to unite the Arab world and modernize its societies, often through authoritarian means. The Ba'ath Party seized power in Iraq in a coup in 1968. Saddam played a key role in the new regime, quickly consolidating influence within the party and the government apparatus. By 1979, Saddam had maneuvered himself into a position of absolute authority, becoming president of Iraq and chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council. This marked the beginning of his undisputed, iron-fisted rule. However, questions persist about the true nature of his power. Was his rise solely a result of his own cunning and brutality, or did external forces, perhaps even early Western tolerance or support, play a role in enabling his consolidation of control? The 1970s are often remembered by some Iraqis as a period of relative prosperity and progress under Saddam's growing influence. A key factor was the nationalization of Iraq's oil industry. This move brought vast revenues under state control, fueling an unprecedented economic boom. The government invested heavily in ambitious public works projects across the country. New hospitals, schools, roads, and infrastructure were built, significantly improving living standards for many Iraqis. The military also received substantial investment, becoming one of the largest in the region. Healthcare and education saw significant improvements. Iraq achieved one of the highest literacy rates in the Arab world during this time, a point of pride for the regime. The government also promoted secularism and women's rights, presenting Iraq as a modern, progressive Arab state. Women held prominent positions in various fields, a stark contrast to some neighboring countries. Iraq was positioned as a rising star in the Arab world, projecting an image of strength and modernity. This era fostered a sense of national pride and identity for many citizens. Yet, it is crucial to acknowledge that this progress came at a deadly price. The development was funded and maintained through increasing authoritarianism, suppression of dissent, and the elimination of political opponents. In 1980, Saddam Hussein made the fateful decision to invade neighboring Iran. His primary motivation was a fear that Iran's recent Islamic revolution would inspire similar uprisings among Iraq's Shia majority. This invasion ignited a brutal, 8-year conflict that devastated both nations. The war quickly devolved into a grinding war of attrition, reminiscent of World War I trench warfare. Both sides employed horrific tactics, including the widespread use of chemical weapons and the deployment of child soldiers. The human cost was staggering. Estimates suggest that up to 1 million people perished in the conflict. The war resulted in widespread destruction of infrastructure and economies in both Iraq and Iran. Ultimately, the war ended in a stalemate with no clear victor. The borders remained largely unchanged, leaving a legacy of immense loss and unresolved tensions. Conflicting views persist regarding Saddam's role in this war. Some saw him as a defender of Arab nationalism against a perceived Persian and Islamist threat, while others viewed him solely as the aggressor responsible for causing immense loss of life and suffering. Despite periods of development, Saddam Hussein's regime was undeniably marked by horrific crimes against humanity. Dissent was met with extreme brutality and systematic repression. One of the most infamous acts was the Halabja chemical attack in 1988. Iraqi forces used chemical weapons against the Kurdish town, resulting in the deaths of an estimated 5,000 civilians. This attack was part of the wider Anfal campaign, a genocidal operation targeting the Kurdish population in northern Iraq. The campaign involved mass executions, forced displacement, and the destruction of villages. Estimates suggest that over 100,000 Kurds were executed or disappeared during the Anfal campaign. It was a systematic attempt to suppress Kurdish aspirations for autonomy. The state apparatus employed widespread torture, arbitrary executions, and enforced disappearances as standard tools to maintain control and eliminate any form of opposition. Thousands of political prisoners vanished without a trace. Following the 1991 Gulf War, Saddam brutally suppressed a widespread uprising, particularly in the Shia-majority south. This crackdown involved mass killings and the draining of the southern marshes, destroying a unique ecosystem and displacing its inhabitants. In August 1990, Saddam Hussein ordered the invasion and occupation of the small neighboring country of Kuwait. He justified the invasion by claiming Kuwait was historically part of Iraq and accusing it of stealing Iraqi oil through slant drilling. This act of aggression triggered a swift international response. A US-led coalition was formed under the mandate of the United Nations. In early 1991, this coalition launched Operation Desert Storm, a massive military campaign that quickly drove Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. The Iraqi military suffered a decisive defeat. Following the expulsion from Kuwait, the United Nations imposed comprehensive international sanctions on Iraq. These sanctions were intended to pressure Saddam's regime and prevent it from developing weapons of mass destruction. However, the sanctions had a devastating impact on Iraq's civilian population and economy. The country's infrastructure crumbled and essential goods became scarce. The sanctions led to widespread suffering, including surges in infant mortality rates, malnutrition, and preventable diseases due to lack of medicine and clean water. Critics argued the sanctions punished the Iraqi people more than the regime. In the lead-up to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, the primary justification presented by the US government was the claim that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction, WMDs. US officials asserted that these weapons posed an imminent threat. Despite extensive searches after the invasion, no stockpiles of WMDs were ever found in Iraq. This absence fundamentally undermined the stated rationale for the war. A theory emerged that Saddam may have allowed the illusion of possessing WMDs to persist. This could have been a strategic bluff intended to deter potential enemies, particularly Iran and Israel. Maintaining this ambiguity, even without the actual weapons, might have been seen as a way to project strength and deter attacks. However, this strategy ultimately backfired catastrophically. The WMD claim is now widely regarded as the lie that started a war. Its falsity eroded international trust and had profound consequences for global politics and the Middle East. The failure to find WMDs remains a central point of controversy and criticism regarding the decision to invade Iraq in 2003. In March 2003, the United States, with a coalition of allies, launched a full-scale invasion of Iraq. The Iraqi military quickly collapsed, and Saddam's regime was overthrown. Saddam Hussein evaded capture for several months but was eventually found hiding in a small underground bunker near his hometown of Tikrit in December 2003. His capture marked the definitive end of his rule. He was subsequently put on trial by an Iraqi tribunal for crimes against humanity, specifically the killing of 148 Shia villagers in Duhail in 1982. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. Saddam Hussein was executed by hanging on December 30, 2006. His death evoked deeply mixed reactions both within Iraq and internationally. For many who suffered under his brutal rule, his execution was a moment of celebration and relief. However, others, particularly some Sunni Arabs, mourned his death, viewing him as a symbol of Iraqi strength and stability. The period following Saddam's fall plunged Iraq into chaos and instability. The dismantling of the state apparatus and military created a power vacuum. The country was consumed by intense sectarian violence between Sunni and Shia groups. This internal conflict caused immense suffering and displacement. The instability and power vacuum contributed significantly to the rise of extremist groups, including Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which eventually evolved into ISIS. ISIS seized large swathes of Iraqi territory. The post-Saddam era also saw increased Iranian influence in Iraq, altering the regional balance of power. The US occupation itself was a source of ongoing tension and conflict. Despite the undeniable brutality of his regime, some Iraqis today express a degree of nostalgia for the stability that existed under Saddam. This sentiment highlights the profound difficulties and violence that followed his removal. Saddam Hussein was undoubtedly a figure of immense power and cruelty. He was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of his own people and initiated devastating wars. He was no saint. The evidence of his tyranny is overwhelming and undeniable. However, labeling him solely as a simple puppet or a creation of external forces also fails to capture the full picture. His legacy is riddled with contradictions. He was a tyrant who invested heavily in schools and hospitals, a mass murderer who oversaw periods of modernization, and a secularist who ruled through fear and bloodshed. It's complicated and unbelievable. Which tyrant will invest for education and healthcare? I wonder if all was fabricated to invade a country and control of their natural resources? History rarely offers simple, black and white answers, especially when dealing with figures as complex and impactful as Saddam Hussein. His story serves as a potent lesson in the nature of power, the dangers of unchecked pride, and the perils of authoritarian rule. It also highlights how external interventions and regional dynamics can intersect with internal politics to produce devastating outcomes. Understanding Saddam requires grappling with these uncomfortable truths and contradictions. So, we are left with the enduring question: was Saddam Hussein primarily a tyrant, a misunderstood national hero, or something far more complex and tragically human in between? The answer likely depends on who you ask and which part of his long, tumultuous reign you examine. If this story made you think deeper, subscribe to the Turkish Odyssey for more untold truths of global history. What's your take on Saddam Hussein, tyrant, hero, or something in between? Let's talk in the comments.